In this webinar excerpt, I'll be answering some questions about the difference between a segment and a list in Klaviyo. For flows and segments, can we create a flow to create a custom segment? And also, what's the difference between segments and a list when we're talking about these? So that's a great question. Maybe at this point, I'll go ahead and shift my screen and we'll go ahead and look at both of these and I'll help clarify just a little bit. All right, so it's a great question, and maybe we should start there just briefly. So within Klaviyo, on the left under audience is where all of your contacts or your customers are going to be stored. Specifically under lists and segments is where you're going to be able to see the different lists and segments, pretty obvious, of the customers. So a list is really the starting point. This is a static list. I'm supposed to use the word in the definition, but it's a static list of your customers. So it doesn't really change. Somebody joins the list, they are static there until a change is made directly to that list. So let's say that I have 1,000 people on my list, those 1,000 will stay. If I want to update the criteria, I would have to go in and update that list. I would have to remove people from the list directly. So it's more of a static way of accessing your customers. And I typically recommend keeping the number of lists small. That way they're manageable. So maybe you have one email list, one SMS list, and then maybe you have a couple of other lists that you use for specific purposes, like if you're running a very specific promotion or something like that. But typically I would try to keep those simple. That way they're easy to maintain. And if you do have to make any updates, everything's in one place. List. A segment, however, is dynamic. So a segment will take your list, put some criteria on it, and that will leave you with a more narrow segment. And segments are dynamic. Dynamic meaning they change based on certain criteria. So for example, if I was editing this segment, there's different criteria that I can use. And if someone meets this criteria, they automatically get placed in the segment. And then if they no longer meet the criteria, they get removed from this segment. And all of that happens dynamically. We don't have to actually go in and add people or remove people like we would with a list.